Hello guys, and welcome once again to the Cardboard Box Item. We have not done a podcast in a while, but some of you may be aware, a little indie game has dropped that we're all aware of called Final Fantasy Rebirth. Now, you may not be aware of this, but myself and Michael are somewhat fans of Final Fantasy VII. We've heard of it. You may have heard of a little podcast we did that was a mere 3 hours long, just talking shite about it. And yeah, the next new game is out, and we want to vent all our thoughts on it, basically talk about it, and all our many feelings that we have about this game. So over the course of maybe 2 or 3 episodes, we're going to talk about everything that comes to mind basically when it comes to this game. And the first episode, we're mostly going to be talking about the
Chadley.
open world.
We're mostly going to talk about Chadley, just all Chadley all the time. Yeah.
The political connotations that his shorts have on the rest of the game and that sort of thing.
Just before we get in, I love how the first time you meet back up with him, you can select like, oh no, I don't remember you at all. And he's really disappointed. It's great.
It sounds like his entire life is based around Cloud, and like he would cry himself to sleep at night if you said that. Yeah. I didn't do that though, because I'm not a monster.
But yeah,
anyway,
what are we covering this first one?
So for this one, we're only going to be covering the first 2 chapters because we're going to be focusing really heavily on the gameplay, the open world mechanics, the world intel, the fighting mechanics, and just 1 or 2 general things. And the following podcast after that, we will be going into more detail on the story and individual mini games as they pop up. But this is more of an overall view as a kind of intro of sorts to the main game. So yeah, we hope you enjoy it. So, thoughts? What do you think? How long ago actually was it since you finished this game?
Maybe 2 weeks ago, I should say. And
you were well ahead of me.
Yeah, I should say I probably didn't do as much of the side content as you, so it will be interesting to hear what you thought of it and like different bits I didn't like get to experience. I'd say I did like 70% of it, maybe, just thinking roughly.
Are you saying you didn't finish every single mode in the frog jump minigame, which is clearly the highlight?
Obviously I did that. Like that's sort of the end game, you know, that's the meat of it.
And what about like Dog Rocket League? Did you not like master that one? No.
It's going to be so fun. Do you know, at the end of this, we have to tell each other our like least favorite mini game, and our because I think we're both going to have the same favorite one, which everyone else who's played the game,
of course, yeah,
but, like,
we'll get to that.
But our least favorite will be interesting to see.
Yeah, but listen, there's a lot to talk about on it. So how about we'll go through it chapter by chapter, and we'll talk about them as they come up.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean, okay, so for chapter 1, and I'm going to tell you this right from the start, I didn't like the first chapter. I thought it started off pretty poorly.
Now, so it starts with Zack.
Yeah, first you have Zack coming back into Midgar, and he's seeing all the destruction. And this is another thing that's going to come up a lot throughout this podcast, but a lot of the multi-world stuff is still a little bit lost on me. It's a bit all over the place, but from what I can tell, this is another world. It's not the same world that Cloud and the rest of the gang are in at the moment.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're just seeing Cloud, Avalanche, basically. Most of them are dead.
Yeah.
But we still... Oh yeah, spoilers, by the way. Yeah. But yeah, he sees Aerith and Cloud being carried off in a helicopter, and he goes after them, and there's a little kind of battle sequence. And this is fine. This was a nice little okay start of it. What do you think of that bit?
I thought it was brave to start with Zack. Like it made me think there would be more of that in the game, and it really only peppers like through occasionally, and then like really at the end is when that all sort of pays off to mixed results, which we'll get into once we get towards the end. I was more intrigued. I was definitely in like a mode of, okay, when is this going to tie up? Like where is this going to make sense? But like I'm not 100% opposed to the alternative worlds thing. I think when we did our remake podcast, I was a bit more like, they changed things, how dare they? But when I replayed remake just before Rebirth came out, I was a bit more like, okay, I know what it's trying to do, and I can dig it. Like it's not all successful, but like I can sort of dig what they're trying to get across. But most of the Zack sections are like mechanically pretty simple because they're so.
He can't really do much, you know. His combat is basically, it's almost identical to Cloud's, but and the new moves that he has, this is something we'll talk about in the very last chapter, but when you actually get to properly fight with him, I didn't really like his moveset that much either.
No, me either.
But yeah, I think the entire thing they have with Zack, I think it's telling that at the very end, when you can replay chapters, there's a setting to turn off his sections. So I think it's obvious these aren't fun parts of the game. These are just to benefit the story. And while I don't hate the multi-world aspect of it, I don't think it's not something I'm entirely interested in either. The entire way through the game, what I wanted to see were the bits that I remember from the original games. Like, how are they going to do this? How are they going to do this? I think it's, as you said, it's brave. They took a swing, and I'm glad they did. It's only just fine. It's one of the least memorable parts of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it is telling that, like, mechanically they can't really do anything with these sections because it might be 5 or 6 hours in between Zack sections, more potentially, depending on how much open world stuff and side quests you're doing. So they can't add a mechanic that, like, you have to relearn each time. So
yeah,
they can be a bit boring. I do like Zack. His characterization is pretty good. Like he's like not too complex, but his like uber chipper attitude, even if like the world is literally ending around him, is pretty entertaining, I have to say. But
I think Zack is a fan favorite. Like I never really got the same level of like Zack is the greatest. Like I thought he's a fine character, but I never really understood people's obsession with him as a character. So I felt this was fan service that wasn't really aimed at me. So it was a bit of a shrug. But when I said that I wasn't impressed by the ending, I wasn't actually talking about that bit. Specifically, I meant the flashback into Cloud and Sephiroth's past. And
at the beginning, you mean the start? Yeah. Okay.
And now, to be fair, there's not really a lot you can do. Even in the original game, this section I don't think is particularly fun. It's supposed to be, it's kind of iconic, but story-wise, it's just an exposition dump, kind of. And I guess they use it well in that they're introducing a lot of the new mechanics with this flashback. You know, they introduce parkour, sort of, which, I mean, when I say parkour, but like the fact that, you know, if you think back to Remake, all the characters were really stiff and rigid. If there was a tiny knee-high wall, you couldn't climb over that. You had to go around it. Whereas in this one, smartly, I think they let you just climb all over the place. So you feel a lot more free-flowing. Now, this does have a slight detrimental effect in terms of the battle system, which we'll get to a little bit later. But yeah, what did you think of just the parkour in inverted commas system?
I didn't hate it, to be honest. Like, I thought traversal throughout was pretty seamless a lot of the time. There will be some caveats to that as we get through the game, because they introduce so many different ways of getting around at points, and some of them work better than others. But it was pretty seamless just to run around. There were occasions where, like, when you're in the open world and, like, you want to get on one specific spot for some reason, like if you're on the chocobo and you want to dig somewhere, or you're trying to pick up something and your guy is just climbing every fucking box around rather than like just stepping onto where you want to go. And like it does look a little jumpy at points, as in like you're running along and suddenly he, like, without any transition frames, jumps into climbing a wall or something. But like, that's like, to be honest, I don't care about any of that. My brain will paper over the cracks with stuff like that most of the time anyway. So I don't hate it. And to be honest, I'm glad they did it, because the like you said, the more stiff traversal in Remake would not have suited an open world. And that's something, it's just a weird quirk of Square, is and I'm glad they like loosened it a little for this one, but like in Remake and Intergrade and even Final Fantasy 16, if there's ever like a bit where you are doing something that isn't just walking, like jumping over a box or climbing a ledge or something, it's really slow and stiff to transition into it. And this still has a bit of that, but it's less so. But like it's always like, oh, a big blue square on the ground where you go, the guy has to slowly move into position in front of it, then he can start the animation of climbing or doing whatever. And that really annoys me. Because it's just it's immersion breaking and it's also slow.
On the plus side, there's a lot less fucking hanging and climbing sections in this game than there was in Remake, which I am very appreciative of. Fair play to them for getting rid of those.
God, well, there's a lot more climbing, but at least they didn't have anything like that stupid bit in Shinra Tower with Tifa
had to climb.
Even doing that the second time when I replayed Remake recently, it was just painful. It's just so slow and unfun. And were you trying to be Uncharted? Like, what are you doing here? But they also introduced the climbing mechanics, I guess. And did you see there was a lot of people? There was like a bit of a Twitter storm about the fact that all the climbing things are like marked with yellow paint and stuff.
I don't understand people's anger about that thing. I mean, like, if you think about it, if you didn't have the yellow paint, you'd be like, where the hell am I supposed to climb? It would be more annoying without it. So I don't know why people get so pissed off about that sort of thing.
I will admit that it's not the most aesthetically pleasing thing, especially if it's meant to be like natural rock formation that you're climbing rather than like wooden boards or something which could be painted yellow. But like it function over form wins in this case. Like I think just being able to quickly spot where you can climb, especially when you get to the open world sections, definitely trumps any, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're riding a big chicken, you know, like...
Exactly, yeah. Like, the suspension of disbelief is kind of something you have to take for granted here. Like, you're going to have to accept the fact this is not real life. This is a video game. Certain concessions have to be made.
So what didn't you like about this section? Just to break it down.
I guess this is something I genuinely have... even in the original game, the flashback section is something that I think only works once. The first time you watch it, you're intrigued by the story, but I just don't find that section particularly interesting. And here, similarly, I wasn't pushed on it. Playing as Sephiroth, for example, felt anticlimactic. Like, it's something the original game actually did a lot better because you can see really plainly the difference in power, like, you know, expressed very simply through hit points being taken off enemies. Whereas in this game, Sephiroth felt like he was, he was stronger than you, obviously, but, you know, not very much so. So it was just, he was a bit anticlimactic. The story was moving very slowly. I remember there's a really long section just where you're climbing up Mount Nibel, and it's just getting into... I know it's training people who might not have played the previous game, but it just wasn't particularly engaging. Although, one thing I will say for it, surprise boss in the middle of it, that originally takes place much later in the game, the Materia Keeper boss. Yeah. Who, and I liked that fight well enough. That was okay. It was... it was good. It injected a little bit of adrenaline into a section that personally I wasn't too pushed on.
It also contains that Materia Keeper fight contains that bit where Cloud and Sephiroth do like a combined
L'Oreal advert.
Yeah, and they like their eyes meet in the middle of like putting their swords into this fucking monster, and it's like those are the moments where this game fucking sings. Like, those little things. When this game is being gay, it's fucking brilliant. It's just like the best moments of it are really
every
gay.
time you talk to Chadley, then you must be loving it.
We'll revise that maybe as we go along. But like the camp factor, I think, is overdone in some sections, which we'll get into later, and I think cynically so. But bits like this where they're like, we want to communicate that Cloud is infatuated with this person, and they do it in like a really interesting way in the middle of a fight there. So like those sort of moments like really, really shine through for me. But
I will say that Cloud in the flashback has a very interesting personality, and it's interesting on a metatextual level as well, because for people who don't know the big twist,
this is a big spoiler. So if you haven't played the original, skip ahead.
Yeah. But as we know, that the Cloud he is describing in this flashback isn't actually him, it's actually Zack. But if you don't know that, all you're thinking is, this is young Cloud. Wow, he was a chipper, enthusiastic guy.
Yeah.
But when you have the knowledge that it's not actually him, it's a memory of him, that has interesting implications as well. It's like, okay, this is how he sees, a young, cool version of himself, and really it's just, this was Zack. And this is who he wants to be. But he's projecting some aspects of his personality onto it in the flashback. So that was really complex and interesting, enjoyably so. I liked that part of it.
Yeah, no, that sort of stuff is handled pretty well throughout the whole game, I would say, as well. But having that knowledge there's other points in this flashback sequence that are interesting as well, having the knowledge about what's actually going on, like where Cloud's house, his like childhood house, is on fire, and you see a Shinra soldier with a helmet on reaching towards it and saying something like "mum" or something, but the word gets cut off, and that's actually what Cloud was experiencing at the time. And then I think there's an explosion, and you get a point of view shot from on the ground of Cloud looking at the door, which could be either from actual Cloud or the Zack Cloud. Sorry, this is already getting confusing. This is the sort of game this is, I guess.
I mean, expect to be confused, basically. Yeah. What did you think of the bit in the reactor? When Sephiroth gets there and he starts having like, bit of a mental breakdown.
I thought it was fine. For some reason, I felt the original had a bit more impact, but I did like Sephiroth's characterization in this whole section, because this is the main way to communicate the sort of mentor relationship that he had with Zack/Cloud, which is a really important part of the original, and I guess also ties into this as well. And seeing him being a bit more human and not just this sort of omnipotent flying thing that can come in and out of reality whenever he wants to. There are certain things, like maybe it's just a familiarity thing, but the impact of his sort of like descent into madness around this section wasn't as well communicated for me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I was hoping for more. I thought this was a really good opportunity for us to get to know Sephiroth as a human being before he turned into God with half a flying appendage, like still taped to his back.
I heard someone describe him as a right winger, and I thought that was very good.
I do like that. I mean, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
But the whole section, it's just, there's nothing exactly wrong with it. It was just all quite serviceable. And because I was expecting more, I've translated serviceable to a bit of a downer in my head. I guess when I say I thought it started badly, I guess what I mean is it started adequately, and that's a shame.
Yeah, no, it definitely starts slow. Like, not just, like, the game as a whole and this flashback section starts slow. There's just two moments I want to point out in it. One is, I think it gets a lot better towards the end, and I really did enjoy the destruction of the village. That whole section, probably the second most iconic visual from the original game is Sephiroth turning around in the fire.
Yeah.
And I really like the subtle stuff they did with his facial performance during that, which sort of belies, because before he looks around very coldly, but there's something more going on this time. Like there's sort of a knowing look he gives. And I thought that was really good. Saying that, just before that section, you have a really slow, annoying crawling section.
Yeah, I hated that. That was not good.
But like the thing is, I can't remember why, but I did it especially slowly because I wasn't paying attention to the icons on screen. So do you know you're going towards Sephiroth and he's surrounded by guys with guns. So it seems like they just stop and wait for ages for him to kill them, and it's really immersion breaking. And like, I don't know why it continues to put these sort of sections in. Sometimes they work okay, but most of the time they're like this, where it's like, are they going for like the end of Metal Gear Solid 4? Is that what they're trying to achieve? But it never. It's
funny because I've heard so many people describe, like, anytime those kind of sections are brought up, people always bring up the Metal Gear Solid 4 microwave section, which is probably the best version of that there's ever been. Like, that one, it's an annoying section, but there it's contextualized and justified, and it works. But here, very rarely does it. It's because in MGS4, not to go, this isn't an MGS4 podcast, but it's, you know, it's annoying for the player to do this. It's kind of like a pain, but that's a shared pain that you're sharing with Snake, who is also going through pain going through this bit. Here it doesn't quite work because it's, I don't know, like, it's simultaneously too long and not long enough. And that if it was really long, you could get what they're going for. But again, MGS4 contextualizes it. He's fighting the whole way through the game, and this is his last big slog. But in this, it's just something that's happened. So, you know, it's not really symbolic of anything.
You're completely right, though. It's too much of a middle ground. You're like, oh, let's make it a bit harder to press the trigger, but it's not. They can't make it too hard so people don't get annoyed or people aren't able to complete it, which is fair if people like have a disability and they can't keep pressing the button or whatever. But it just don't do that sort of section then. You know, if you have to be like Kojima and just go over the top with something like that. Like, it goes on for way too long and your finger is fucking about to fall off your hand. That's the only way that section works.
Exactly, yeah.
The only other thing I want to point out, it's just, and I'll have a few of these throughout the whole podcast, but it's a really minor detail. In the basement of the Shinra Mansion. Is it mansion or manor? Doesn't matter. Mansion, okay. In that sort of research room with all the books, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't do this. In the original, if you look at the bookcases in the background, the books are sort of, you know, you can see the spine of the book, and some of them are like sort of toppled over, and on several bookcases they spell out VII for the Roman numerals of 7.
I never knew that.
Yeah, if you go back and look at, like, when we put up a YouTube version of this, I'll put in a screen grab of it. And it's just like a little small Easter egg that like some artist put in the background. And, you know, 7 is a thing that comes up constantly throughout the game, you know, lucky 7s and things like that. But they didn't put it in this. And I'm like, that's such an easy thing to do. You know?
Shinra Mansion was a really weird one for me. Again, it was a little bit of a downer.
So small.
For one thing, it really small. They really only have the one, like, you can't go upstairs in it for some reason. And, you know, it's basically just a big empty room with an elevator that leads to the gameplay section of Shinra Mansion. And I felt like they could have done more with that. I will say I thought the exterior design was really good. I really liked when you're walking up to the Shinra Manor and it's like, oh, this feels a bit daunting. You know, this is like a place of serious importance. But once you get inside, it was just, this is just a house. It doesn't help the fact that this is an issue I'm going to bring up again and again. The soundtrack in the game is kind of muted. It's, again, this is nostalgia talking to a certain extent, but the original game, they relied so heavily on the soundtrack to set the mood. And in this game, everything is so visually and audibly noisy that it's kind of hard to discern anything in terms of like theme or mood. So in this game, while the Shinra Mansion theme is somewhat present, it's not to the same degree, and it just doesn't really have the same effect as the original game did when you first walked through those doors and you got that, you know, serious dong, that incredibly intense mood music.
No, I completely agree. And that general point about the music, maybe we'll get more into it later in a specific scene. There is some amazing music in this game, but for me, it didn't. I think I prefer a remix approach overall. And I think what you're describing as well is probably more of like just a generational trend with music that unfortunately it's become a lot more milquetoast and homogenized to all sound very cinematic. And sometimes that works really well. And there are some points where the music is brilliant in this. Like even in this flashback, I really liked, some people hate this trope, but I really liked the sort of droney sounds that they mixed into Sephiroth's theme. Like the doom, that like long, that was a very good impression. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. Yeah. I quite like those. I thought they were effective. Some people hate it because it's like in every movie trailer now.
If it's done well, it's good. Yeah.
But yeah, overall the music. Do you know what the main thing to say about the music is? There's so fucking much of it. Like,
and it's so loud. Like, I know this is like old man shakes fist at a cloud kind of situation, but like something I realized about halfway through was there was a couple of scenes where the sound effects and the music were so loud I couldn't hear what people were saying.
Yeah.
So I actually, and like if you go into the menu, all the sound settings, they're all up to 10.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, fuck this. I'm just going to so I brought music and sound effects down to about halfway point, and I had a much better time of it after that.
Yeah, I brought music down as well. I think I should have brought sound effects down, but yeah, it is mixed a bit high. But like it's weird. Sometimes I want the music loud, especially if I'm going around the open world. That's when I want the music to take over. But when I'm in story scenes where people are talking, I just want it to be like mood, like John Carpenter style, ambient stuff.
When we get to the iconic bit where Cloud faces off against Sephiroth, that's when, as in the original game, he's like, and that's all I remember. And then it shoots back to Calm. And Jesus Christ, Calm had some makeover. Like that had 4 houses in the original game.
Was it just one
like,
screen in the original game as
yeah,
well?
I mean, I think you can move the screen up and down slightly if you go up and down. But here it's like, it's like fucking Venice or something minus the, the actual water.
Canals and boats.
Yeah. But like, it's, and I like it, actually. It's a nice introduction. The town itself it's one of the bigger towns, I think.
Yeah, you can tell they put a ton of work into it as well because they knew it would be the first town you get to explore properly in the game. So like it seems like around every corner there's some like non-playable character doing something interesting. Like there's kids having a slap fight or something, and there's like
every town has like somewhere that like there's a dance or a yoga thing going on, and if you stand still next to them, Cloud will join in regardless of what it is.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
cool.
So like I think it's in Gungaga there's a yoga class happening, and if you walk up to it and stand still, Cloud starts stretching along with them. So yeah, every single one of them he joins in. I thought that was a really neat little thing. I like we're going to go into this later, but I really like how Cloud has evolved as a character in this game. And a lot of the things that happen to him recontextualize Remake in a way that makes a lot more sense that I really appreciate. I think they've done him quite well. Not perfectly. There's some times where I just want to shake him because he's acting like such an idiot. But for the most part, I don't think he's done pretty well.
And one thing I liked is they mostly didn't soften edges too much with him. As in, there's other characters who can fulfill the sort of chirpy, typical JRPG protagonist role. And I think that's like a general point about all the characters is they do have pretty distinct personalities and are characterized pretty well. Some better than others. And that's something we'll get to as we go through. But there's this one thing I need to point out. The gang, the team, the party, I should say. Yeah. They go to sleep, but then Tifa wakes up Cloud and has a chat with him on the rooftop. There's something really clunky about that dialogue in that Cloud says something along the lines to Tifa, "Oh, back in the reactor in Nibble, I saw you and you had been wounded and all that blood, and I thought you were dead." And then she says, "Oh," and thinks for a second and says, "Oh, what, are you accusing me of having died then and I'm an imposter now?" And
I don't really know how they made that jump exactly. Yeah. I think it was supposed to be something that we were supposed to read the room there, but it was a bit of a jump.
Yeah, that was incredibly clunky.
One thing I will say about that, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they did this. She was like, "Oh, so you don't believe me? Well, how about I prove it to you?"
Yeah.
And like she just lifts up her vest, and like Cloud goes, "Oh!" I was like, I think it's supposed to be this really emotional, it's like, oh, clearly there's a scar there, but I can't have been the only person who was thinking like, well, what has she just shown him? It's like, these are real, Cloud. I'm a woman.
It's like, why? That was a weird mix there, like trying to get that moment into that scene. And sort of characterizes the whole game. It's this tonal, like, whiplash occasionally.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that in this game, like really massively so, where it's the most whimsical sort of thing in the world, and then it gets insanely dark, and like sometimes this will happen like within just a couple of minutes of each other.
Yeah, most of it I think they judge pretty well, I have to say, but sometimes it can be like in this scene, like where it's like, no, you need to give this scene a bit of breathing room before you start introducing stuff like that.
I will say, though, while the dialogue itself was a bit clunky, it's an interesting idea that they didn't do in the original. The idea that Tifa might not be the real Tifa. I'd say this is something that's going to feed mostly into the last game in the series, because they don't really conclude that in any kind of satisfying way. So I'd be intrigued to see. It's very much like the Whispers from Remake, where I'm not necessarily digging it per se, but it might transpire into something interesting later on.
I took it as like almost like a red herring in a way. Now maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it has more narrative payoff later, but I thought of it, it's to keep us guessing about the ending, because this whole thing is going towards Aerith's death, and if they can convince us, especially with that scene in Gongaga where Cloud attacks Tifa, are they going to try change it so that Tifa dies or Cloud kills Tifa or something like that, like and it doesn't really go anywhere really. It's not, but I like, there are some interesting scenes as a result of it. I don't hate that bit in Gongaga actually, but that's jumping ahead. We'll get into that as we come to Gongaga.
But once we get to explore Calm a little bit, again, this was a real, whoa, this place is huge. So, and this is where you kind of get to start playing with the game systems a little bit properly, and you get to explore a lot. So one thing that opens up here, and for the most part, I love this, is your relationship with your other teammates. The way this usually transpires is you'll have a little bit of extra dialogue with them. You can go up to them and they'll say something to you like, hey, I love killing monsters. How about you? And he's like, no, killing monsters sucks. Oh, no, relationship went down. Or, yeah, killing monsters is great. Or is it, I'll do anything to catch Sephiroth. You know, so you can have all these like good, bad. And like sometimes when you start the game, it seems really obvious what the right answer will be. But as you go along, sometimes they'll say something and you think you're saying the right answer, but it turns out not to be. And I like that, because
that's good.
It's not essential to, you know, I don't think this is tied to any trophy or anything like that. There's no achievement that you get for a relationship, but it's just flavor. So the fact that if I were to replay this entire...
It does affect who you go on the date with in the Gold Saucer. I think that's the only thing. Or maybe, does it affect who you can do synergy attacks with as well?
No, so synergy feeds into your relationship status with the other character. But while you're right on that, one thing I will say about that's somewhat negated, because when you finish the game, there's an extra options menu that opens up and you can select which character you will go on the date with in that menu.
Yeah.
So the first time you play the game, yes, it's important for the date, but after that, it's pretty much superfluous. But I still like it because it adds flavor, and it's really enjoyable to see the different responses they have. Like, I think that's unanimously success there. Like, some people might argue that because you can change who you go on the date with in the options menu, it's a bit useless. But I think for the first time around, that's grand. And the second time around, you probably just want to explore the relationship.
Yeah,
so for me, I
see the other scenes anyway. Yeah.
And this is where some of the best scenes between characters happens, I think. Like, the way your relationship opens up with each character, I think is done really, really well. Like, particularly with for me personally, because she's a favorite, I always loved Yuffie in the original game, and in this one I think she's great as well. I loved every time I get to interact with her in those, because some of those were just absolutely hilarious.
I think it was genius as well to tie the side quests to the relationship, Tim, and then have each side quest like Cloud buddy up with one of the party to do it.
I love that. I thought
it was
that was
a really
genius.
good idea. Yeah. and because it made me, I think side quests work pretty well in this game, I have to say. It's a huge, I know you mightn't have played it, but it's a huge step up from Final Fantasy 16, which is, it's a similar system in some ways, as in you go into an area and once you complete a story mission there or get to a certain point, then a whole load of side quests open up. It's way better. It's way better than than remake as well, because most of those felt like, you know, busy work. And not all of them are very like we'll get into them as we go through a bit more, but not all of them are very mechanically complex. But some of them are very they always generally have something, as in either a new mechanic, an interesting battle, or some like
nice story beat, something like just something to expand. Yeah, no, I think the side quests now, this is where it gets a little bit complicated, where I do love the side quests themselves. I have something of an issue of how they affect the pacing, and I'm not really sure how to fix that is the problem, because I love the main story, which like I feel should be chugging along the whole time, but I also love just fucking around, playing in the world map and doing side quests. But the problem is one badly affects the other. So if you're just there for the story, like the side quests, they butcher the pacing completely. So you're like saying, okay, let's go get Sephiroth. You cross a river. Okay, let's play around for about 7 hours, like collecting intel, and then we'll progress slightly further. Oh no, the pace is fucked in this game. Like it's something we complained about, both of us, in remake, but it's way worse in this game. But I eventually just stopped caring about that, and that made me enjoy the game a lot more. But it's a huge flaw. It definitely. I'm wondering. So I played it because I didn't want to miss anything, and now I unfortunately found out after I finished it that none of the side quests get locked out. So you could do no side quests whatsoever, and they'd all still be available in chapter 12, which is the last chapter in which you can do side quests. But the problem I felt with that was, if I didn't do the side quests, where so many of them were kind of focused on battles and getting items or materia, I thought I was going to be severely under-leveled as I went along. I felt like I had to do them.
I think there is an expectation, because even you get a recommended level thing on the main quest, on all the quests, but on the main quest as well, it says you should be level 13 or 40 or whatever when you do this quest. And you could go around and grind monsters, but the main way you can level up is doing side quests and the open world content stuff as well. Now, that isn't why I did it, really. It was more, to be honest, I enjoyed a lot of the stuff anyway, especially the side quests, so I just wanted to do them. But it did feel a little like I should be doing these.
Yeah, I feel like this is just an unfortunate carryover of the fact this is a remake. So, like, they're transferring a very old story that was very compact out of necessity, and they're trying to expand it. And it's like trying to to coin a Lord of the Rings phrase, it's like trying to scrape butter over too much toast. Like, they're adding so much like fluff pieces, which are very fun, really enjoyable, but they don't really affect the main story. Whereas in other games, when they're built from the ground up, you can have it in such a way that the side quests intertwine much more naturally into the main story. And in this game, they just don't. So while it's fun, while it's like, I think it's a huge success what they did with all the side and the world intel, which we'll get into as well. Like that, I really enjoyed that too. But it's just a shame that it kind of screws the pacing up so badly.
Yeah, there's a lot of quality, but as a whole, it sometimes isn't balanced. I should mention, I like this game.
Oh, yeah. And actually, I should mention as well, because I had a very up and down relationship with this. Like, I started off, I'm not sure. Then I got to basically chapter 2, and pretty much for ages I thought this is the greatest thing ever. And there was a bit of a dip again towards close to the climax. But by the time I finished it, I was like, this is a good game. I like this game. I think they've done a great job.
Yeah.
So,
Too,
like, it's not without its flaws. And that's kind of what we're going to go into.
We'll sum it up at the end. But we will. Yeah, because I feel like, inevitably you get into nitpicking and negative stuff when you're going through something like this. But like, no, I did really enjoy it. Like, I wouldn't have put 80 hours into it, you wouldn't have put, you were just under 100 hours as well, I think. So you don't do that for games you hate most of the time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And actually, listen, just to talk about possibly the biggest wow moment in this entire game, the first time you walk out into the grasslands is a great moment. It's because it's so ridiculously huge.
Yeah. And detailed as well. Like, it's not like very barren. Like, and some of the open world sections are more aesthetically pleasing than others. But yeah, it is a huge wow moment when you step out.
I definitely think they put the majority of their budget into the grasslands because they wanted to make a good... Because the grasslands is an insanely good area. Possibly the best area in the game, I would argue.
Yeah.
Because it's so aesthetically pleasing. Everything is laid out almost perfectly. And it's great, especially in the first map, before you really understand how world intel works. And because after a while you're okay. Oh, okay, this is that section. This is the towers. This is the battle part. This is the proto relic. You don't know any of that going into this first. And before I even went to the Chocobo Ranch, which is the first place you're supposed to go, I just explored tons of the map. And I was like, what's this random house in the middle of nowhere? What does this mean? You know? And I like that a lot better. It's another issue that I have, and I feel like this is something they could have fixed. This is something that was very fixable, was they kind of went down the Bethesda open world route, where I think they should have gone down the Zelda open world route. You know, they should have everything had labels, everything was easily understood. So, oh, this is where that goes, this is where that goes, this is where I do this. But with Zelda, like Breath of the Wild in specifically, it's, you know, just discover things, you know, and I felt they should have done that more.
I feel like they almost wanted a bit of that, but they couldn't help railroading people a bit and hand-holding. And because there's, like, you know, the grayed out sections in the map and just go explore, but like inevitably you're just going to find the nearest tower and then get your icons and then go to your icons. And it really disincentivizes you just to run around and explore. And like there are certain sections where I would have loved to do that because the traversal is very fun, and there are certain sections where I was really glad to have the icons because it was hard to navigate, specifically Gongaga.
Gongaga was very tricky.
Yes, I think everyone hates the map in Gongaga. I like the open world, but we'll get into that later on, I guess. But yeah, the open world, I think they did it as well as they could have, because
I think they did a good job overall. I wouldn't even say I'm not dissing it in any way. I think the open world was done well. It just not amazingly, but well, very well.
If we're taking it like, because they had a lot of options in front of them in terms of remaking, they could have done like a spruced up version of the world map screen from the original, where it's like a big cloud running over the world. And you know what? Like, if you had asked me before Remake came out if I would have been happy with that, I would be like, yeah, just keep it the same as the original. Like, I don't care. Just give me better graphics. That's all I want. But I like that they went in this direction, and like parts of it are a bit like a typical open world game and quite boring, but other parts are a lot more engaging and fun, you know?
I wonder, I'm thinking now, because if I was to ever replay it, I'm wondering, would I try replaying it and just not do any of the side quests? I wonder how the pacing would be then. You know, because like you can restart the game with all your same equipment. So I'm like, oh, if I just did this now from start to finish, skip all the side quests and world intel, I wonder how that'd go. And I'd be interested to see what that would be like.
I do think the game will either force you at times to do stuff. Like, this isn't exactly the same thing, but when you get to the gold saucer, you have to go and play each game before you can progress. But also, there was one point where like I'd gone forward in the story a bit before doing some of the side activity or the intel, and Chadley, when I was walking by him into town, I think it was I can't remember where it was, but he said something like, "Oh, it looks like you haven't been getting intel lately." Something like that. Something really like passive aggressive.
Passive aggressive.
Yeah. So whatever, they really Chadley want you to do that stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing all the side quests, Chadley is, to a certain degree, probably the most the loudest character. He talks more than anybody else because he's constantly on your little dustbuster with a computer screen, whatever thing is that you have.
How did they not get that we'd hate him? Like we hear him so often, and like after doing the simple, when you scan the materia live stream thing, we do that a million times. It's the easiest thing in the game, and every time he has to be like, "Wow, you fucking did it!" I'm like, but did I learn nothing from Navi in fucking Legend of Zelda? Like, it's the exact same problem.
See, I wouldn't say he's that bad. I think they knew they needed I think they needed like a voice in your ear to say, "Oh, you just did this, blah blah blah," and it was better to do someone who's kind of emotionless and like lacking character as opposed to anything else. Because if you have somebody who's like a wacky guy or something like that, it's going to rub a lot of people up the wrong way. But if he's just like, okay, he's robotic, doesn't have much of a personality, it's inoffensive. So I think that was their thinking behind him.
Yeah, and like it's again just that sort of thing where we have to, or they feel they have to cater for every particular type of player who might be somewhat lost or confused in these sections, or need like a positive reinforcement after everything they do. Whereas it should just be like, oh, I know I've completed it. Like it got a bit painful at points just to, when I finished like some world, open world event thing, that I had a call from him, and then I had a little progress bar on the screen, and then I had a flash. Like I just wanted to move on to the next thing. Like I didn't want all this busyness, but.
Two things I have to add in here now. So again, I had to mess with the settings more in this game than most games I've had to do in a long time. So one thing I had to get rid of immediately was when Chadley talks through your controller. I immediately switched that off because that was really annoying. Second thing, and maybe there was an option to turn this off. This was really, I don't know anybody who would have liked this. But when you're fighting special monsters, when you
I
have
know what
those,
you're going to say, yeah.
And like as soon as the fight starts, they start talking, and it's so loud you can't hear a word they're saying, but you're aware they're talking. It's like, I don't. Who thought that was a good idea?
It's the girl Chadley, isn't it?
Yeah,
I can't remember her name.
Which raises even more questions, actually. Now, when you get right down to it, like, what is his deal with her? Like, is that supposed to be his sibling, or is there some? Is he a robosexual now, or what's going on?
What is
exactly?
Chadley though? Like he's
an android,
the most powerful thing in the universe. Like he's everywhere.
Yeah. But like, why does he have a little beautiful assistant person thing now? Like, this is my lovely assistant, Mai. And again, they've got this weird little "I hate you" banter going on, and she seems to really dig Cloud as well. She wants to hook up with him, it seems, and so does Chadley, allegedly. I don't know. It's again, I don't think they were the worst. I think they were relatively inoffensive, but they annoyed more than they surprised or amazed. They were mostly a detriment, but they generally served their function. So yeah, we've talked about the towers, and I think while they're inoffensive, they do kind of mess up the exploration a bit. And the special monster fights, I think they're important. They're not necessarily brilliant, but they do kind of encourage you to, get into battles and fight things. And the fact that there's a little kind of a checklist says, right, I've done that now. It gives you a little, endorphin boost, saying like, yes, I've achieved something, as opposed to just walking into a random battle in the original. But a couple of other ones now. The one thing I think I liked, I'm going to get your opinion on this, the random treasure troves that you'd wander across.
Just so I get my terminology right, what are they?
When so you walk into a special area and you'll get like a little heading saying like, oh, abandoned reactor, and then you'll see like there's 3 treasure chests in here somewhere, and you have to find them.
I like that. It was pretty inoffensive, but like do you know, with a lot of these things, I always found that they did put them in smart places that weren't stupidly like insultingly obvious.
Yeah.
So like I'm thinking of some from Knock on Gaga. So how am I after forgetting the names
Nibelheim?
of No. Where's Red 13 from?
Cosmo Canyon.
Cosmo Canyon.
There you go.
There's too much of this game. There's too many names. There's some of them around Cosmo Canyon I remember being like, oh, that was a smart place to hide that, because I had to jump over a wall and then double back and stuff like that. So, like, again, they're not the bullet point I'm going to put on the back of the box or anything, but they were inoffensive and good for what they were, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that, like the hidden treasures, like when you're on a chocobo and you can see, oh, there's something buried nearby here as well. One thing I liked about that was very often I'd be on my way to do something on a chocobo, and this happened a couple of times, and I liked it actually. I'd be on my way to an objective, and then I'd see a baby chocobo running across in the distance, and then my chocobo would sense something was buried nearby. And it was a really interesting thing where I was like, okay, I think I should search for the treasure first, because I'll still be able to see the chocobo then, and then I can go chase after him. But maybe I should go for the chocobo first in case I do lose him. Oh, but then I'll lose the treasure. Crap. And that was a nice little interplay of like, okay, what do I, like a tiny little moment of conflict where it's like, what do I do now? You know, which is the most important thing to do here.
Games are nothing but a series of interesting decisions, and that's like a little mini one that seems organic when it happens. It also is emblematic of, or emblematic, I should say, of maybe a flaw of the game, and a positive of the game is it throws everything at you at once.
Yeah,
it could be a little overwhelming.
So much. And actually, you're right. Actually, when you say it's emblematic, because again, this is such a visually noisy game. And we're going to get into this as we talk about the battle system, because while I don't dislike the battle system, I think it's really, really good. I do feel like they threw too much at it, and it's actually not quite as good as Remake's battle system as a result.
I think Remakes felt a little more weighty. Like there's something floaty about this one where, you know, and it like sometimes Remake would, like replaying Remake recently highlighted this to me, is that there's so much noise and things happening and special effects happening that it can be overwhelming. 16 was really bad for that as well. Sometimes it's like a fireworks display right on your screen and you can't even tell where you are. And I think it got a little bit like that. Like it's a godsend that it slows down and almost pauses the game when you're selecting like abilities or items or whatever. But yeah, I do prefer how Remake handled it. Saying that, I understand that mightn't have bolted on to the open world quite so well. Yeah, and I get it. I completely understand it. It's an unfortunate flaw in the system that I think may have been unavoidable. Synergy was another thing that was very overwhelming. Because I don't know about you, but I had quite a lot of synergy abilities by the end of the game. And what I constantly was forgetting, I constantly forgot the fact that there was synergy actions and synergy abilities. Yeah, I hardly ever used actions.
Yeah, never. I think the odd time, once or twice, but you don't need to is the thing. There's no really incentive to use synergy. For anyone who's listening who's confused, synergy abilities are those ones that are like mini limit breaks where two people pair up and do a really cool move, whereas the actions are the ones that you can do at any time, and it usually involves like blocking in a special way or attacking slightly hard. They were poorly explained as well as something that I think is quite relevant to it. I didn't really understand why I should be using them.
But the thing is, also, it's poorly explained, and it's explained in the middle of you learning probably 5 other things in the space of like 3 minutes. Like, I do quite like this open world section, but you get a lot of new information quickly, and sometimes it takes a while for those things to settle in, and sometimes things get like lost between the cracks as a result. And like, those synergy actions are one of those things for me as well.
And the thing, what really annoyed me was there was a very easy fix for this that they didn't implement. It's like, why didn't they have a tutorial in Chadley's VR section? That would have, honestly, that would have been exactly what it needed. And it was one of the very few things that wasn't tutorialized in, because he has individual battle sections for each character to kind of introduce you to their mechanics, which I loved. I thought that was a great idea because it's completely optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it kind of gets you to familiarize yourself with your abilities. I really needed that for Kate Sith in particular.
I should have done that because I never really got a handle on him, if I'm being
He
honest.
was a tough guy to understand, but if you use him correctly, he is actually a powerhouse. He's really, really good.
Sort of like the original, like he's weird, but he has these like crazy limit breaks and stuff that can like destroy bosses.
But the battle system overall, like it's good. I like they made little tweaks to it that I kind of like some of the new moves you have. What was it? Cloud's Firebolt Blade. I really liked. That was a really good one because it was a great way of seeing like, okay, maybe this monster is weak to something. Well, I'll just use this so I can eliminate 2 elements right off the bat.
That's exactly what I would use it for half the time. Yeah.
That was really good. And one thing, some of the more powerful moves were two really powerful moves that I use all the time in Remake. As far as I know, aren't in this. Tifa's shooting star move. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
I don't think that was in. You didn't get that move, did you?
In what? In Remake?
No, in Rebirth. This one.
Oh no, I didn't in Rebirth. No.
Yeah, so I don't think that's in this game. And the other one was Aerith's energy beam, which was really the only move of hers that I used in the original. She didn't have that. So to that end, I found Aerith a really difficult character to use in this game. I really didn't like using her at all.
I mostly used her for like passive buffs and stuff like that. She has lots of like, she makes a circle around her that heals people or that like makes their ATB bar go up quicker or something like that. And I would mainly like deploy that with her and then switch to someone else to do like any damage. Be honest.
Yeah, I saw what they were going for, but just for me, it just didn't work. I didn't found that style of gameplay particularly fun. But on the other hand, Barrett, they have amped up to like 1,000% in this game. Every move he has, I feel like, is really useful. So he was like one of my favorite characters to play as.
He was so useful because, especially in those like smaller random battles, it's so easy to quickly charge his full ATB bars and then to do like what was it called, maximum fury or something like that.
Such a useful move.
Which is like a powerful move that uses both of them. So to be honest, if I'm running around, I would mostly just like attack a bit with Cloud and then switch to Barrett and deploy that move and then back to whoever. And you'd like it was the most efficient way to get through battles. It did probably disincentivize me from being a bit more, inventive with the way I would use moves in random battles. But at least like the boss battles, a lot of the time didn't force you to like think on your feet and come up with new strategies, at least.
Well, I think, and this is something I realized when I played through Remake again before playing Rebirth. I played it on hard mode, and I think that's where the real meat of the game comes from. Like, if you're playing on regular mode, you can brute force your way through some boss battles or fights or whatever. But when you're playing on hard mode, you really have to play intelligently. And I think that's where all those moves will really come into play, where you really have to use certain strategies to get through. You won't be able to brute force your way at all. So I'm okay with that system as it is because I'm not going to I haven't played hard mode yet. And it's going to be a while. I'm not going to go back to it for a while. But I imagine that that's where it'll really come into its own. So I'm going to give it a pass for that because I think it works there. It really does.
I just want to say 2 things about chocobos. I know it's been like 5 years since we talked about chocobos, but I did just pop back into my head. 2 minor things. One is I hated that it would switch to the chocobo music when you got on a chocobo. Like the first time you get on, that's fine if it does it for a minute and then it dissipates. But there's certain open world sections where I really like the music, like in the Grasslands, for example, that uses the original open world theme and a really nice orchestral version of it. And I really wanted to hear that as I was traveling along, but it would just get interrupted by other music. There's too much music in this game. Every little mini game has its own music. Every area has music and then quieter versions of it and then battle versions of it. It's really impressive and they put a lot of work into it. But like, do you know there's specific music for if you do a side mission with a dog? There's music that has barking in it. That's a specific dog side mission. Yes, I'm not bullshitting because there's I think there's 2 or 3 side missions where you have to follow a dog.
this is probably why the game is the size that it is. You know, like, I mean, in terms of like data, like it's enormous, and it's probably just because of all these music tracks on it.
Well, audio data takes up like the most space apparently on a lot
Makes
of
sense
these,
then. 2
bigger
discs.
games. Yeah. The other thing I want to say about Chocobos is the Billy. You meet Billy at the Chocobo Ranch, and I sort of like, you know, that you meet him as you go along throughout the world, and he pops up. Like that's an element I liked, and the different Chocobo ranches you encounter as you go through the world. I just love his design. It's the quintessential JRPG over design of a character. It's like insane the way he looks, and because in the original he's just like, again, like a little blue square or something, but like he's just so extra in this. He's pretty insane, but I like
it worked for me. Another world intel, but it sounds like we're dunking on this game a lot. I want to emphasize again that like the feeling you get just exploring a lot of this game is really, really good, and like it's we don't want to keep going on about that, but there's little niggly bits. And on that topic, fucking Mog houses, I had no time for by the end of the game. I hated them.
I think I got 3 or 4 in, and then I was like, they made this to annoy us, right? Like this, the music, the personality of the Mogs, the stupid attacks they do. Like this is like to aggravate you, right?
Yeah,
it's bullshit. It's really bullshit. Like
this is kind of the big problem I have with pretty much the world intel / side missions as a whole, like world intel in particular, that everything becomes mechanical. Like, you know exactly what you're getting into when you get into a new map. And unlike the yellow paint to indicate where you can climb thing, this kind of gamification kind of annoys me, because I just knew what to expect every single time. And their argument against that would probably be, well, what about the proto-relic bits? Like, they're different every time. And a lot of those just weren't fun either. Some of them
they were
great.
Mixed. Like the highs were really good with those, and the lows were really bad. But I like those missions because they were inventive and different. The Mog House is just like a shit mini game,
and you have to do it like 7 or 8 times, and it gets less fun as you go along. And I just did. It was great the first time you saw it, and you're like, oh my god, it's the Mog House. It's only in the arcade game, in the original. Wow, amazing. But and even the reward for finishing them all, I don't think was that great. I can't even remember what it was. I think
you get access to the shop, and I guess as you go through, you get more items because that's what you trade in Mog coins for. And like, that's the only reason I can see why they put this in, because otherwise I'm like, who was waiting for a Mog House side quest? Nobody. Why was like months of work put into that? Like, but the only reason I can think is, we have this big open world. People are going to be like opening random chests and exploring corners. We need some currency there to incentivize them. And generally they try to diversify that by having more than one thing you can get. So Mog coins is a common thing that you get, and they need somewhere for you to spend them. Apart from that, I'd like, who's this for? I don't get it.
One thing I did like, and it might be just the music, but I loved when you found the sections of the live stream you had to scan.
The music was great.
I love that. Like, really simple, but maybe that's why I liked it. It didn't waste your time at all. You went in, you did a quick mini game button prompt thing, and then you had more info on random sections of the game. So I like that. I thought that was done really well.
Is it maybe a worrying thing that, like, I also felt the same way about those live stream things. I enjoyed them because they were so simple and easy and unobtrusive. But is that a flaw? Because then our favorite part of it is the one that's the least mechanically complex and that we could get over with quickest.
I don't know. Maybe it's kind of hard to call, really, because there were some side missions I liked, but again, it's that intrusiveness on the main plot. Like, I think this game would have worked a lot better just simply if it wasn't a remake. Because the whole way through the game, my ultimate goal was, I want to see how they did this bit. So I was constantly wanting to push forward, but afraid to skip anything in case I missed something really good. So unlike, say, a game for, just to make a comparison to Final Fantasy 15, which is the most recent one of the main series I've played, that one was all about just fucking around. So, and like, it didn't matter about the plot because it was always, it didn't really matter how much you advanced it, because you weren't thinking, how are they going to do this bit? You were just thinking, okay, I'll let it wash over to me when I get it, So it was a very different vibe. I'm trying to think, there is one other thing. Occasionally you'll have digging parts on the map. They say, oh, I've discovered a bit where you can dig more, like, for more things. Again, similar to the live stream bits, unintrusive, and I thought they were okay. So yeah.
Do you know what I didn't hate was the summon relic statue things where you have to put in like you have to memorize the button prompts in a circle.
Yeah, that was fine. I like that, actually.
Yeah. It was somewhat interesting to play, and like they got a little tough towards the end. They were never really that hard though.
No. But I think summons as a whole, like in the first game, they were I feel like they weren't really that useful in this game at all. I hardly ever used them.
Very rarely, yeah.
Yeah, and like anytime I did use them, it's an interesting system they have where you can summon something and then you don't have to interact with it at all, and it'll do one big move when it leaves. But you can also use special moves, or your own ATB gauge to get it to do a special move, which I hardly ever did.
The only time that was useful for me was if I was in a battle where the enemy had like a particular elemental weakness that I didn't have like materia equipped to my party for, which was a bit annoying when it happened, because enemies like that are like so spongy to take down if you're just attacking them normally. So if I had like Leviathan and it had a water weakness, then I could like, I'll summon him and then I can use their attacks to do big damage, and that was the useful part of it. But yeah, apart from that, it was like, this game's a little too easy to need them, to be honest.
Yeah, and again, this might be different in hard mode. So again, I will give it a pass for that, because a lot of the systems, you can brute force your way through most of this game, I would say, just using the battle system alone. Like, you don't even really need materia that much. And just to emphasize that, this is skipping ahead a bit, but for the last battle, I didn't equip my party properly. So I only had 3 characters with materia and the rest had none, but I still managed to beat it. So... it's quite telling that like you don't really need it like that much. Okay, just last thing before we go on any further, the proto relic in this section, I think so. This one was the only one I think that didn't really have a mini game attached. You were just chasing after bandits, and I quite like that. I really like this like little side mission with the bandits from the original game. They're trying to. Basically come clean and try to be legit business partners? Or I think did that only come later?
I have to say, just this is relevant, but I think the humor works in this game pretty well. Oh yeah,
it definitely does.
Like, I thought it was quite funny, like deliberately funny at times, like intentionally funny. And like these guys are like just really over the top, and it's like a Three Stooges thing going on almost. But it was funny, and I did like the crossover from the original game as well, and like meeting them. And then you have a side mission later in the game where you can meet back up with them again, and they undermine their business and go back to being like bikers or something like that, which was great.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, I like this proto relic, and I thought the flash to, I guess, Wu Tai. I don't know. I can't remember where it goes.
It's not clearly explained. And I remember when I saw bits of this in trailers, I assumed it was Wu Tai, which, spoilers for anyone listening, Wu Tai doesn't show up in this game. But it's kind of implied it might just be some kind of dreamscape. Yeah, I'm not really sure. And it was interesting that they have this essentially one boss battle tied to a bunch of mini games throughout. And again, for better or worse, sometimes I really didn't like his sections. Other times they were great. He got a great intro, at least. I really liked the first time we have to do the proto relic stuff, which ultimately turns out to be the Genji armor. Did
you know it was Gilgamesh at first?
Oh yeah, the second I saw him, I knew it was him.
I didn't. It wasn't, I think, until the second or third, but when when I heard his music, that was actually what tipped it off for me. Because you can hear is a battle at the big bridge.
Yes. God, I
you
love
hear
that song.
I think in the Nibble open world battle that you do with him. And that was really cool to hear that. And I thought that was an interesting like new thing to throw in, but I actually didn't finish all the Proto Relic stuff. So I didn't get to see the conclusion, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I won't spoil it for you then, but yeah.
You can. When we get to it, you can spoil it for me. It's cool.
Okay. So again, just for our listeners, we're probably not going to go too heavily into the story of this now. I think this is mostly going to be focusing on the mechanics and that side kind of thing. But one more thing we have to talk about, and this is probably going to be a biggie, Queen's Blood.
Yeah. Amazing. So,
like, oh my God.
How they fucking nailed it, and it's the best like card game in any Final Fantasy. It's so good.
It's arguably the best part of the whole game. I love Queen's Blood so goddamn much. It is such a deep game. Like, it's incredibly, insanely deep. There are so many different ways you can play that. Like, I got through most of it. I didn't play I think it's the last match I still have to play. I haven't done that yet, but I was kind of brute forcing my way through for a while, and then I hit a wall. I was like, okay, I need to change my strategy a little bit here. What'll I do? And that's when I started experimenting with replaceable cards. So cards you can place on top of your own cards. And then again, that just opened up a whole new world for me. This is incredible. And there's like multiple other strategies you can get that I haven't even touched upon yet. And it's just incredible to me how well they managed to balance this. And it's just so much goddamn fun.
I read that there was a team that they made a small team within Square to just make this game, and they spent 2 years making it, and by the end of the development they were addicted to playing it. So like, that's probably is a good indication of how good it is. It's fantastic. It's really good. One thing I'll say is they maybe don't explain some of the mechanics as well as they could. Like initially they do, and it's a very easy game to get into, but like the sort of stuff you're talking about where it can get like, I remember going up against some player and she kept destroying her own cards to buff her own other cards and getting like huge numbers on them. And I was like, what? I didn't know you could do that. That's crazy.
I think the rules are somewhere. I think there's a rules section in the main menu that you can go back to. But obviously, you know, it's better if it's just well explained to you first rather than having to consult that. But maybe that's inevitable with something as deep as this.
Yeah, or like it's too much information to take in at the first instance, so you have to dole out in like smaller chunks. But one thing I love is the way they characterized all the players as well. It was so like even in Calm, you meet the crybaby guy, you meet the lady with the boxes around her who built a fort.
Oh yeah.
Some other people,
animals who can play. There's a chocobo and a dog. And
but there's even little in jokes about that. They say, "Oh, my dog's going to be playing a chocobo on TV soon." And if you talk to the chocobo's owner, they're like, "Yeah, we're going to be playing another animal soon." It's like, I loved all the players and individual parts like that.
It's incredible how when I found out there was going to be a card game in it, initially like my heart sank a little because card games just very rarely grab me. I'm just like, oh, I mean, it's a video game. Like, why am I playing cards? But it's crazy how hooked I got onto this almost immediately. And I think I might end up spending a lot more time on this when I jump back into it a little bit.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, because I didn't do I didn't actually finish the last Queen's Blood game. I meant to go back to it and I forgot. And I didn't do all of there's those special type of games you can do in.
I actually didn't do any of those. I'm planning on going back to them, but at that point, I just wanted to advance the story. So I'll come back to them.
Yeah, they're more like puzzles than normal games anyway, but yeah.
I really, really want to get a real life version of Queen's Blood, and I just know eventually they're going to. I'd love it if there's a smartphone version of this game. Honestly, this is one of the
sure that's coming. It must be coming. Yeah,
it's one of the very few smartphone games I would genuinely play. I think.
They did that with The Witcher 3. They released Gwent, the card game from that, as a separate game eventually. I never played Gwent in The Witcher, actually.
Same.
It's so weird. But yeah, I love this. This is so, it sort of distills the game in a way because it's something completely unnecessary that they put too many resources into. And even if it was on the surface just a really deep card game that you can play with some NPCs, that would have been a lot of work. But they put so much more, like the whole thing on the boat in Costa del Sol, the stuff in the Gold Saucer, the whole weird mission that you can do in it where somebody's haunted by one of the cards. That's fantastic, and I'm so glad it's in the game. Sometimes they put resources into things that I wish weren't in the game, like the Mog House, but you got to take the good with the bad in this as well.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, just to move us on a little bit now, I'd say we're probably going to cut it at the end of this chapter or chapter 3, one or the other. But so once you go to the Chocobo farm, you have to catch a Chocobo, and that's what allows you to cross over into through the swamps where the Midgar Zolom is, or Midzomer, I think it's called in this one.
Midgar Zomer. Yeah, it's more of, it's more like a Norse sounding name.
Yeah, I think that's an actual monster from Norse mythology, the Midzomer, which is why I think they change it. So this section, I heard what they were going to do with this section before I played the game, and while not hugely offensive, I gotta get this out in the open. I really didn't like the way I liked the boss battle. I didn't like the general depiction of how the Midgar Zolom interaction went. By which I mean, in the original game, you stumble across the Midgar Zolom impaled upon a tree, and it's a wonderful moment of foreboding where you realize, holy shit, look how powerful Sephiroth is. In this version, you have a boss fight with it, which is fun. And then you have a cutscene that it was very reminiscent of the cutscenes from Remake, which we talked about. We had issues with that, where Sephiroth just shows up too much. And to be fair, he gets a lot better in this game, but this is a bit of a carryover from the last game. He shows up yet again, and he basically annihilates this snake, and it kind of sucked all the tension out of everything, because I kind of just felt like, okay, Sephiroth's God, I get it, so I didn't like that. But what were your thoughts on it?
No, I agree. I sort of didn't like that we fought the Midgar, or whatever it's called, the snake.
The snake.
I did enjoy the battle. I thought it was a good battle, but I didn't like that we fought it because it's meant to be this big imposing thing that only Sephiroth can take out, and I feel like us fighting it is a sort of a flaw that goes throughout the game, and that they feel like they need to punctuate certain moments with a boss battle. I think every little section I can always tell, there's going to be a boss battle at the end of this. They can never just let something end. Which, means you fight too many boss battles throughout the game, I think. Most of them are very good, in fairness. It's just, it's a little predictable at times. The cutscene, there was some imagery I liked in it, in Cloud under the water reaching up towards Sephiroth, like the symbolic stuff of his dependency on him being intertwined with his hatred of him in a very vague sense because of his shattered memories, and he's not even fully sure what happened. But the original nailed it really with that ominous scene about him. I don't know what their rationale was. Maybe they're like, this is a really cool opportunity for a boss battle, so let's do it. Or they were like, we've already shown too much of Sephiroth, so you seeing him, something he killed, isn't going to have the same impact. I don't know what their thinking was.
Yeah, it's adventure to say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's just a symptom of the game being broken up into 3 parts in the remake as well, that they feel, we need to end each one on a Sephiroth fight. And I don't know, I've mixed feelings, because I'm glad they did split it into 3. It means that we've gotten two really good games out of it so far, and that games that feel different and are appropriate for what they were adapting. But I do agree that we see too much of him. But again, your point, he is deployed a lot better than he was in the original, and linking him directly to Cloud's psychosis and his, his devotion to him, or I guess like the genetic thing because of the materia or the oh god, I'm getting all my terminology mixed up. The experiments done to him mean that he has this sort of genetic connection to him in a way, which we'll get into later with Roach, by the way. The way they do that in this game, I quite liked. Like,
same.
He maybe does pop up a little too much still. And there's too many moments where Cloud's like, Sephiroth, can you guys not see him? And I'm like, yeah, Cloud, you've asked them 10 times. They can't see Sephiroth. Okay?
I will say, while I do like generally how they did Cloud in this game, that whole thing where, you hear the static and he clutches his head and he's like, I got really sick of seeing that by the end of the game because it was every 5 minutes, it seemed like. And
it ramps up towards the end of the game as well.
Yeah. So I think we're probably going to leave that there because we focused a lot on just the gameplay and mechanics and that kind of thing in this section. But we're going to continue this in another podcast. I think we're mostly going to be focusing just on the story and how it progresses for the next one.
So next time we'll be getting into the Mithril Mines.
Yeah. Anything you want to add? Anything before we go?
No, I really just want to give my final thoughts, but I might save them for the end because we'll be going through everything, and I feel like it's almost coming out, but like I have very complex feelings towards the games, or I find it very hard to sum it up in one sentence. But to be honest, like I'm mostly feeling very positive about it, and really, really looking forward to the last one. I have to say.
Yeah, there's I think it's a solid game, a rock solid game that is somewhat mired a lot, mostly because the fact it's a remake, I think, is kind of what holds it back. Because I think they feel a sense of obligation to honor the remake or honor the original game, and some things they just cannot feasibly do. Like making a brand new game in 2024 while also paying homage to a game that came out in 1997. They don't quite clearly link. But for the most part, I think they've done a good job. And I am also very excited for the last chapter. So in our next one, we will just be, for the most part, just focusing on the story and representation of how events go out. Much less so on battle systems and stuff like that, except when boss battles come into the fore, I think.
Okay. See you then, guys.
Good luck.